Time once again to have a conversation with Scott Osborn here on the Wealthy Pilots podcast. If you were checking out any of our episodes over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about places to invest, places to start saving, places to start putting our money in the new year. So we talked about, where to contribute on our last episode. So this episode, Scott, let's talk about some of the stuff you were starting to walk into it. So I've reeled you back in. Now I'm going to let you loose. We'll talk about other places to maybe invest, especially if you're a high income earner. Maybe you're maxing out, whatever the case is. We'll look at some different options for those folks. How you doing, my friend?
Great. How about you?
Hanging in there, man. Looking forward to this conversation. It's always good to kind of think about this stuff, especially, you can make changes throughout the year, obviously, right? We can continue to tweak and refine and all that good kind of stuff. And it's important to do that, especially when we're talking about finances. But if we're looking for some other avenues, what's some things we should start thinking about? Other places to contribute, other places to save in the new year?
Well, I think it comes down to the first thing you got to figure out is how much do I need to be saving?
Okay. 15% is what the new numbers are.
That's the general rule of thumb. I mean, if I'm going to live if I'm going to take a vow of poverty in retirement, I probably don't need to save that much right now. If I'm going to live off just of my Social Security, I don't need to save anything. I've not met one pilot that wants to do that.
Not a good idea, folks. Let's not do that.
Right. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
So there's somewhere in between that and saving all of your income that we need to land in, right? There's somewhere in there that is the right amount for you to be saving. Most people are just saving, they're maxing their 401k out.
Right.
And then that's it. Now, don't get me wrong. When you're maxing the 401k out, and
that's great. You're doing something. You're doing good something.
$70,000 a year between the employer and employee contributions, a little bit higher with the market-based cash balance plan. If you happen to be one of the higher earning guys, or girls. And, but my point is, hey, how much do we need to be saving? So once we figure out that we're saving enough, well, then it's like, where do we save it? So today I don't want to talk a ton about figuring out how do we figure out how much is enough, but let's talk about where we would save. Because for most of our pilots, when you look at their lifestyle and what they live off of, just your 401k is not enough. You need to save more than just what's going in the 401k.
Right.
And so if we look at that, where else is there to save?
Well, the first thing everyone does, Scott, is they go, the Roth, right? So I'm going to save in a 401k because that's what I've been taught to do. Now let me look at a Roth. Well, if you make a lot of money, you're like, well, I'm out of the Roth conversation because I make too much. There's limits.
I make too much money. I can't contribute to a Roth.
Right.
But as you know,
you can backdoor it.
The IRS ain't going to make it easy on us. We can do what we call the backdoor Roth.
Yeah, you're coming in the back part of the plane, not the front.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it's one of those things that to me, I'm always like, man, why does Uncle Sam do this to us? Just make it hard on people. But
have you met Uncle Sam?
Yeah,
yeah.
I worked with him for 20 years in the military.
Didn't you understand? That's their job is to make it harder.
Yeah, he's good for it. So
yeah,
he's consistent at least. Now,
true.
A lot of folks that I'll work with are like, man, I've heard of that, but I don't really nerd out on this stuff. I'm not trying to look into it that much, or I start looking into it. There's conflicting information.
It seems shady. Just the term seems shady. It's totally legal.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They might as well call it the under the table Roth or something.
Right.
But it's not overly complicated. It's really just a couple of transactions that we have to do to make it happen. But yeah, if you're a pilot and you think you make too much money to get money into a Roth IRA, I don't care whether you call it a backdoor Roth or a contribution or whatever. We're trying to get money into the Roth IRA. If you think you make too much, you're wrong. We can figure that out. Yeah. You probably make too much to contribute, but there is a way that you can get it in there. Now there's a handful of stipulations that you want to be aware of, like, hey, have I done any other conversions? Is there other IRA money I have sitting out there, and I don't want to get in the business of having to track pro rata contributions and distributions later, blah, blah, blah. That's all the stuff that you start to read about that just feels like I'm not going to mess with it.
And it scares you, but somebody like you will handle that. So
yeah, that's, for our end of it, that's taking it off their plate and you just manage the transactions for them.
Yeah.
But absolutely, that's something we should be doing for you and your spouse. Now, we might have to do a little bit of prep work to get your accounts kind of cleaned up and organized before we can do it. But man, getting 14 to 16 grand into those Roth IRAs every year and compound that over time, that's a good chunk of change in retirement of tax-free money. And most of our folks will tell you, I'm not missing that 14 grand a year throughout my spend throughout the year, just because their income's like this. And hey, I missed out on 14 grand, but I didn't really feel that money not being in my life. But your tax-free bucket appreciates that little sacrifice over time. It can, be several $100,000 in retirement. So it's,
that's true.
Adds up for sure.
Well, so we're talking about other places to save. We go, well, the 401k, that's what we've been trained to do. Okay, now we talked about maybe doing the Roth, backdooring it because I make too much. Then the third thing people immediately go to is, well, I guess let me just get into real estate, right? It seems like those are the three things that people wind up saying, but there's other stuff too.
There is, your buddy at Northwestern Mutual or your high school friend's going to tell you should be plowing it all into a life insurance policy, bro. That's what
cash value life insurance policy. Yeah,
just bank on yourself.
The bank of you, right? Yep.
Yeah. I don't know about that. So most of their gut feel and intuition about that being, I don't know if a scam is the right word, but the stock market, last time I checked, insurance companies have pretty big buildings.
Very true.
They are very, very good at taking our money to make money for them. I'm not saying they're unethical, but
right.
I am saying that we will generally get better returns for ourselves in the stock market than we will in insurance.
Well, that's a great point. Everybody's situation is different, right? So maybe looking at some sort of a life insurance, policy of some kind, could be the right vehicle for someone, but it may not be either. It's not just the standard go-to, just like real estate. When I mentioned that, it may not be the standard go-to just because you think that's the only place you can dump your money, because maybe you've got zero interest in real estate. Maybe you've got zero interest in being a landlord and you don't want to pay someone to management, right? So there's a lot of little factors in any financial endeavor.
Well, and that's where, the life insurance side is nice because it does beef up that after-tax, tax-free bucket for sure.
Sure, yeah.
However, on the taxable side, that is where that rental lies, right? I mean, we have the capital gain slowly growing on the actual asset of the house itself that you eventually realize when you sell that house. And then you have the income from the house that you're paying taxes on.
Right.
Now, if you're looking for tax write-offs, that's a great place to start. Hey, I want to be able to itemize my deductions and have a small business and take advantage of all that comes with being a business owner. That's great. If you don't have the interest for it though, and the passion for it, I would say you probably don't want to go down that path just for those financial reasons.
Yeah.
Because I found most people are not super happy doing the work for the money. If they like doing the work, then they like the money that comes with it.
Yeah. Or also, getting text at 3:00 in the morning because the heater went out.
Yes. And if you get up to 5 or 6 and you're going to pay a management company to do it for you, well, that's a little bit different. But
sure,
I can also tell you, like working with retirees for a long time as well, none of our 70-plus-year-olds want to be dealing with real estate. They do not.
It can be a hassle for sure.
They do not. And so now they get in these situations where they're like, I know if I wait until I die, I can pass on the capital gains to my kids or I get a free step up in cost base, they call it. And it's a real tax efficient way to transfer wealth. I just don't want to deal with it this last 10 years of life. So then I end up paying a big capital gain there. And so what we'll typically recommend is if you're not wanting to get into the real estate game, you can, in that taxable bucket, slowly start filling that up with after-tax investments that you're still buying, great mutual funds or great ETFs, great shares of America's great companies. And we grow that taxable bucket and you get taxed on the capital gains and you get taxed on the dividends. So you're still paying some taxes in there. However, it does enable you to, especially as your account grows a little larger, deploy with a strategy we call tax loss harvesting. And tax loss harvesting is like, this year's a great year where, you got 80% of the market returns driven by 20% of the companies. A third of the S&P 500 is negative this year. So how do we harvest some of those losses to offset some of the gains and keep this portfolio tax efficient as I grow? And so we highly recommend, especially if you're like in your last 10 years of flying, really trying to plow some money into that bucket, because that bucket, when you're early in retirement, you retire at 65 and most guys are, I got to start paying myself now every month. You can live off of that bucket of money, for basically zero income tax. You might pay a little bit on your dividends, but you're basically just paying the capital gains there. And so if you're 60 plus pilot, or you got 5 years left to work, you really need to be thinking about, what am I putting in that bucket? What do I own that's tax efficient? What do I own that's going to pay me income early in retirement while I'm working on these other things, doing Roth conversions, delaying Social Security, whatever the case is that you might be working on in your plan to drive some really, really big impact for older you.
Yeah.
You got to set yourself up. Younger you's got to take care of you, older you today, by starting to invest in that taxable bucket. And it opens the door to a lot of these tax efficient strategies within your investments that, candidly, most people just don't know about. They're definitely not going to manage it on their own.
Right, for sure.
And, if you get the right professionals working that for you, even for us, I don't sit there and do that all day, every day. We hire that out to people that just sit at the computer and manage tax loss harvesting. And it drives a lot of efficiency in the portfolio for my own family and our clients. So,
yeah. And efficiency is going to be the key, and I know we try to be keeping these a little bit short here. So maybe we'll do a follow-up episode, Scott, and dive further into one other option, which could be an HSA, right? If you have that available to you, a health savings account could be another great place for you to put money into as well, especially if you're starting to get older. It's like a Roth on steroids, right? So that could be something we could look into. We could have a conversation about that on another podcast later time if you want.
Yeah, for sure. HSA, that's low hanging fruit for sure for these guys to be maxing out. And,
it's not a ton of money, but it's very helpful.
It's very helpful. And, you're going to use it in retirement. If all the data, you are going to use that in retirement. And then it's basically worth, $2 for every $1 that's in in because of the tax.
So max it too, for sure.
Max that sucker for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, it's, the key takeaway on my end is hey, the 401k is probably not enough. You need to be doing a little bit more. Right. And, write it out and then get it done. These things are not that hard to get done, but new year, new you, get that saving plan dialed in and then let the investments do what they do for you.
All right. Well, if you need some help figuring out how to make sure that you're maxing out where you can and how you can and what you should be doing, reach out to Scott at retireairlines.com. That's retireairlines.com. We've got the links in the show descriptions below. So make sure you go check him out, have a conversation with him, get yourself some time on the calendar. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify in audio form. Of course, YouTube is where everybody's at. So hit that little notification button there and a little subscribe button and ring the bell so you catch new episodes when they come out and all that good jazz. And welcome to the new year, my friend. I'll see you next time here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn. Thanks, buddy.
See y'all.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.